Hey everyone, so this is a bit of a change of pace from what we usually do around here. I've wanted to add a second video a month to the channel, something like that, for a little while now, and I basically decided to take the plunge this month because the UK has decided to have a bunch of bank holidays that mean I have very little to do the week of recording. So here we are. I'm going to start doing reviews of video games, mostly the ones I play on stream, which you can catch at twitch.tv/SKTheCrusader. Go check it out, I have a good time on there. Or ones that I have a weird nostalgia for that I'm revisiting. It may not just be video games, it can be all sorts of things. We're really just going to feel out how this works and whether it's worth the effort. I just want something that's a bit shorter, lighter, a bit more fun. Maybe. The other ones are fun, but a bit more. Something a bit more casual that we can all kind of like ease into a little bit. Fallout New Vegas is an old game by now, and it feels kind of weird to say that because it came out in 2010, which I don't want to. I don't know. I feel fucking ancient just thinking about that sort of thing. Anyway, let's move on, please. For the love of God, let's move on. But the interesting thing about it being released in 2010 means it's contemporary with Mass Effect 2, which maybe I'm being a bit horrible about it, but looking at the sort of presentation of both games, I was quite surprised to find out that that was the case. And in some ways, the comparison with Mass Effect 2 will be flattering, which I might make in this video. We'll see how it kind of plays out. So the point of saying it's an old game is everyone's had their take on New Vegas, right? So, like, what am I actually going to say that's new here, other than I kind of like this game that was old that I played on stream? Well, yeah, that's the difficult part here, right? We need to find something new and interesting to say about Fallout New Vegas, and I've tried. And I think I've found a couple of little things that maybe go unmentioned or aren't mentioned enough that we might find interesting. And I think there are elements of Fallout New Vegas that represent fantastic design choices. Design choices that really should have been made in other games because wow do they work and wow do they make the game feel like it's fantastic to play, even though it has some, what we might call some issues, some teething problems still. I don't know if you can call them teething problems when the game is 12 years old as of recording, but we'll sort of move with it as we go. So some vague objectives here, because I like to set out what we're going to try and do. I want to go over some of the well-trodden arguments about Fallout New Vegas. The stuff everyone kind of agrees on. They're like, oh, isn't this game great? Don't we love it? And, like, we do love it. I mean, look, I'm wearing a Sunset Sarsaparilla shirt. I clearly love the game, right? But I want to tell you a little bit about these overlooked choices that Fallout New Vegas made, or the design team made, that really, really nailed it. And, yeah, we're gonna see whether some of these classic arguments stack up based from my recent playthrough of it on my Twitch channel, which, incidentally, I will be putting in clips of me playing over some of the bits of me talking, so you're not just staring at my face the whole time, because you stare at my face, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, a lot. So let's mix up a little. Although my face will be in the corner of the videos, so, just a bit less of my face. I think we can all agree that might be a good thing. I also want to talk about some of the criticisms you get with Fallout New Vegas. Like, there are naysayers out there, and in some ways, I think they're justified and they're completely right. And in other ways, I think, well, I think you've missed the point of the game. But we'll get to that bit later, obviously. And I also want to tell you once and for all who the right faction is. You might actually be surprised by my choice. So let's go. Let's get into it. So we should probably go over the classic stuff, the things everyone's already gone over, just get ourselves warmed up here. So, almost everyone seems to agree that this game is good, has some redeeming features if you think it's bad, and yeah, there are lots of videos that cover a lot of ground. So we're going to try and cover what those usually are and maybe throw in a couple of other ones, but we'll sort of see how we go with this. First of all, I'm a sucker for good soundtracks, and I can't ever play the soundtrack on my stream because Twitch has insane rules about terms of service, you know, use of music, and it gets your stuff muted. And to be honest, I like having the VODs up for you all to go watch them. Yeah, the soundtrack fucking rocks. Like, there's no other way to put it. The soundtrack does rock. It is really good. I really enjoy, when I'm not playing it on stream, just sort of wandering the Mojave, listening to the music, because it sets the scene of it as a kind of a Western game, you know, a themed Western, a post-apocalyptic Western, if you like. The music really sets the scene of that quite well. I never get to put my partner on blast on these videos, because usually I get to say, oh, thanks to my partner for reading the script. Well, there wasn't really a script for this one. There were just like a handful of like really terrible notes that you all mercifully can't see because they are really bad. So she didn't have to check anything, so I could put her on blast. The famous song from the game, or at least one of the famous songs from the game, Big Iron. My partner, initially upon listening to that song, was very confused and thought the iron was, you know, like an iron for your clothes. And I'm putting her on blast for it because, one, she at least finds it funny that she made this mistake. So we're not laughing at her, we're laughing with her. And two, the image of, like, cowboys riding around with giant irons is incredibly funny, and probably the basis of a very, very funny t-shirt design that I should probably get someone to make, actually. Info coming soon on that, I guess. The game also doesn't hold your hand too much, right? It doesn't tell you, it doesn't railroad you necessarily, right? It just really strongly recommends that you take a particular path to Vegas, because let's be honest, if you go the short, direct route to Vegas as a level 1 character, you'll die, and that's actually great design work, but we'll kind of come to the great design work a bit later. But it's actually a really good way to guide the player. I mean, you could survive. It's not like impossible for you to survive walking that path as a level 1 character. It's just very, very unlikely, and you're going to get very, very frustrated if you keep trying to do it. And I kind of love this sort of D&D Dungeon Master vibe of being like, well, you can definitely try it. Let's see what's up. Doesn't necessarily work every time. I've certainly never tried it. But, you know, you are free to try it. And I think that's actually a really, really neat bit of the game, that it actually guides you like that. It also visually guides you. But again, design choices. We'll get to design choices later. So there are a lot of characters in this game, as you might expect from a role-playing game that covers an area the size of the in-game map. There are a lot of characters in it, and that's good. And we'll talk about the characters who represent certain factions later, but there are genuinely a lot of interesting characters depending on how deep you dig into them, and it's optional to dig into them, right? That's actually something that the Souls games do quite well, which is that, like, the lore is kind of optional. You can choose to read it or not. Probably helps to read it, but you get out of it what you put in. And it's kind of the same with New Vegas, right? I particularly enjoy the satisfaction you get from actually learning a lot about a character and then finishing whatever it is their story is. So one example for me in New Vegas is murdering Cook every playthrough. Now, frankly, Cook is the scum of the earth, just the lowest of the low, and the fact that the game makes me feel good about killing him makes me think that this game has good character design, at least in terms of investing me in even hating these characters, right? Because, yeah, like, what if it was just another quest? I just go, kill him, come back, don't really care, right? But Cook, and there are videos about Cook, so go watch them if you don't know who the character is, because it's grim. It's really, really grim. But the fact that you get that satisfaction from it makes it feel like it matters in universe. And it's entirely optional. You don't have to do it. It's a side quest, really. But the side quests are where the action's at in this game. Again, another great design choice. Also, I will just bring up the satisfaction of confronting Benny. And the way he's like, I'm pretty sure I shot you in the head. It's always fun. And it's always fun no matter how you choose to conclude it. You know, if you're a woman courier, you can kill him in his sleep, or sleep with him, or do all sorts of things. You know, I, in the stream playthrough, ended up just sort of getting ambushed and then finding him at Caesar's camp. And yeah, like I had to do... Well, I actually ended up not doing what Caesar told me. I ended up activating the army. Caesar too stupid to realize that that was not an explosion. But again, that's good storytelling. But the satisfaction of seeing Benny nailed to a cross was... Look, maybe it didn't make me a good character or a character with particularly good karma. Although my character was also a cannibal, so... you know, I feel like positive karma is not quite the main thing I'm going for here. It's always fun, and it's always fun to kind of get to know some of the characters, or even just encounter random characters. I really, really enjoyed running into, and I genuinely forgot about this because it had been about 10 years since I played the game, Pauline and Sammy Wins and their hideout and getting their... and I convinced them just sort of, yeah, you know, that's the greatest plan of all time. And they ended up chickening out of their really quite insane plan to assault all of the casinos on the strip, because that's not a great plan. I'm glad they figured that out with a bit of sarcasm. I do like the various minor factions, and this seems like the place to talk about them. And the groups that are in the setting... This is the place, really, for me to talk about the minor factions, and I really like the minor factions. They suit the setting of the Mojave generally, and they also draw upon classic Fallout material, right? Great Khan's Brotherhood of Steel, love it. I love these callbacks. And there's also a series of fantastic callbacks to various bits of American culture. You know, like the Kings and how they're all Elvis impersonators for some reason. I don't know, I guess... A gang of Elvis impersonators is what the post-apocalypse really needed. But it is a nice touch, right? People are clearly beginning to find a way to reconnect with that past, and that's good. Or even, like, thinking about Benny again, that affected way that he speaks. It's a nice touch. They're trying to figure themselves out and place themselves in an actual cultural context that makes sense to them. Because obviously a lot of the material of the pre-war world is gone, so... you make do with what you have, and so you end up with Elvis impersonators and weird 50s archetypes running around. Although Fallout generally does seem to be like mocking that particular period of American history. Again, it makes sense in the setting. And, you know, you get the sense that the various factions are at least trying to make something of the Mojave and the wider wasteland. It feels lived in. There are moments where the game actually kind of looks okay. Look, I know it's like fashionable to shit on the game because it looks like it's filtered through several layers of dirt. And look, as I said earlier, it was released in the same year as Mass Effect 2. And Mass Effect 2 looks great compared to Fallout New Vegas. But New Vegas absolutely has its moments, right? Seeing the Lucky 38 towering over the wasteland at night is, to me, an incredibly striking moment, and also just a really, really nice bit of environmental work. I don't think there's an argument to be made that it's, you know, a beautiful, stunning masterpiece, but it absolutely, as a game, has its moments, and I think that's, you know, worth mentioning and worth noting. My hair is such a fucking mess today. It's just slightly warm in the UK today, and my hair's just gone massive. Right, there are a lot of design choices that mean Fallout New Vegas still stands as a great game. Probably the greatest modern Fallout. I mean, it's hard to top in a lot of ways, so it's a bit unfair, but also it is very funny how probably the best Fallout game was not made by Bethesda, and also it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. But there are a lot of really neat design choices, and one of them is it does a great bit of visual storytelling, right? So think about Novak, right? Realizing Novak is only called that because of a decaying no vacancy sign. It's just good fun. Or when you go to New Vegas and you see on the outskirts of it, you see that improvised New Vegas sign. It's the small things that make a setting feel like it's actually a living thing rather than just kind of like an elaborate toy that only responds to you poking and prodding. And the Wasteland does, and the Mojave does respond to you poking and prodding too. But it's a sense that this place has its own history. And yeah, some parts of it seem petty or insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it exists, and it feels like a lot of it makes sense. And that level of care and attention, it's not necessarily rare, it just feels rare, and that's probably a sign of something that's not necessarily good in a lot of RPGs, but the world feels like it has a significant history to it. I mean, yeah, obviously, like, the significant history is the nuclear bombs falling, and ignoring the implausibility of survival after the nuclear bombs, because it is not that many nuclear bombs to ruin the entire planet, to be honest, but ignoring that bit, I mean, all of this feels like it makes sense. The game also accounts for the player being a bit careless. Look, I went to the NCR correctional facility to try and find that new sheriff for Prim, and, well, I went in hot and I killed the guy you were not meant to kill. Now, does that mean I can't find a sheriff for Prim? No, it means I can't find the one that I really would have liked to have. Because, frankly, and we'll come to this in the faction section, the NCR is probably not great. Not a fan of it, right? The game assumes that you're a bit of a fuck up. And to be honest, I am a bit of a fuck up when I play these games, and I like that. There should be a lot of ways to solve problems, whether it's lying, bluffing, tricking people, flirting with people. You can do an awful lot of flirting with people, stealing, or just good old-fashioned coming in hot with your assault carbine and doing a bit of the old-fashioned murder. And you'll probably know the criticism of Fallout 3, especially if you've watched that H1 Guy video, which is good and makes a lot of good points about Fallout 3, which is that Fallout 3 doesn't allow for you to kill certain characters because they're too story critical. Well, in Fallout New Vegas, if you want to kill supposedly story critical characters at basically any time, you can do it, and that's good. Like, I think that's good. I think that's a good level of player agency. Having redundancy built into the storylines makes a lot of sense if you intend for the game to be an open world, something you actually interact with, rather than a railroaded down one particular path or another. All of this brings me on to the main character. Now, a lot of people don't really think about Vicoria or Courier 6 as particularly important or noteworthy of praise. I think it kind of goes overlooked because you are Courier 6, right? POV, you are Courier 6. No, this is not the POV, you are Courier 6. I guess that would be my POV. Anyway, it's not the point. The point is that you are Courier 6 interacting with the world. So it's easy when you talk about the game to talk about Courier 6's interaction with the world and what they do with the world, rather than say anything interesting about Courier 6 themselves. And they are worthy of praise, because let me put it in the simplest way. Courier 6 is perfectly designed for this exact game. Possibly the best matching of character design to game ever. And that's because their story, you get to decide what happens to Courier 6 through the course of the game. That's not controversial, not confusing. Everyone understands that, right? And you get to choose who they align with in the game. Are they nice to the Khans, bad to the Khans? Do they, do they do what I did and disintegrate a bunch of legionaries because they kind of stupidly agreed to help the NCR? Look, we all make mistakes, but the point is that Courier 6 has a backstory. Not necessarily fixed, because it does respond to some of the perks you pick. So, for example, it is implied with the cannibal trait that you've eaten ghouls and super mutants. Or if you have the lady killer trait, it's heavily implied by Vicoria that Vicoria has been to Montana, which, yeah, I mean, pretty sure the courier is also a citizen of the NCR, so there's probably some degree of sense to be made there, considering that, like, the NCR extends into Oregon, so there's not really that long a trip. Anyway, they're a courier. They're well-traveled, right? They say that all the time. But also that they impregnated someone in Montana, because there's a line of dialogue where they ask a character, are you 17? And which I find funny, because the character in question, I've forgotten their name, like, has facial hair, like a lot of facial hair. And it's like, I don't know what kind of 17-year-olds you're getting out there in the wasteland. Maybe it's the radiation, but I don't think the guy was 17. I don't think that was a reasonable guess. You know, that a male courier has those sorts of characteristics. You can say that the courier has been to New Reno, you know, and they've seen a show there, right? There are lots of little details that come out about the courier that you have very little actual control over. Yeah, it comes out in the perks, but you don't have, like, control over the courier's backstory. The courier is the courier. They come into the game as the courier. And yeah, they're a blank slate who you project onto, but actually they're not that blank. It's just that the details are so removed from the setting itself, or at least the period of time where you're actually doing things, that you can actually relate to the courier, even if they're, you know, a cannibal bisexual, which, you know, my character was, which, you know, is good fun. I think that was probably the canonically correct playthrough. Cannibal bisexual who wants an independent New Vegas, but also seems to struggle to get good karma because they keep eating people. I think that is the perfect courier. And that courier has backstory to him, right? And yeah, I'm not really going to talk about the DLCs because I've never really had any cause to play them. They expand on the courier's backstory in certain ways. Good fun from what I hear. Again, never really had cause to play them because I only played it like 10 years ago, maybe last, and I wasn't really a big DLC guy back then. But the point is that the design choices of having the courier be just some person who has done their job vaguely competently, and yeah, you can get hints of their backstory through characterizations that you give them, is a really, really good way to do it. It's not the kind of thing that you saw in, say, Mass Effect 2, right? Or Mass Effect series. You didn't really get to pick much backstory in Mass Effect 2 if you were importing a character like I was, but in Mass Effect, you were promised a lot of narrative control over the world and over Commander Shepard himself, and that's how you get multicolored endings that are essentially identical. Whereas in Fallout New Vegas, because there wasn't this promise of, like, you control every single detail, every single choice has a massive impact, there was more an implicit understanding that that was going to be the case. It's shown to you through the game, and yeah, you get the nice summary at the end that's like, well, you know, chaos engulfs the Mojave if you're an independent New Vegas, which I have thoughts about. By removing the player from direct narrative control in that way, you create a more satisfying character experience. Like, yeah, the courier is kind of a blank slate, but finding the little tidbits of character really, really, really make a big difference to the experience. I think it's an underrated aspect of the game design, and I think it's really good. I think more games could stand to have characters like the courier. I guess I should answer some of the criticisms that you get from the game. There are two really main ones that I want to address. One is that, and I saw this from a friend of mine who will remain nameless, which is that it's not a good game because the combat system is fucking terrible. And look, the combat system is not great. And people kind of go, it's a bad shooter, and the game is a bad shooter, therefore it's a bad game. And that would make sense, right? That's actually a really, really good point. If the game was a shooter, the game isn't a shooter. Combat is really like a secondary part of the game. And yeah, like, it's janky and it's horrible. And again, it's one of these things where, like, it was released the same year as Mass Effect 2, so I kind of, in my head, have now connected the two. And it's like, yeah, the combat in Mass Effect 2, much smoother, much less of a fucking pain. Still, a good game, and not the point of the game. And yeah, look, if you have to include, like, the VAT system in your shooter, Nah, maybe it's not a very good shooter, but my point here is that it's not a shooter. That doesn't mean that the combat system is good, by the way. The combat system is not good. It's just not the point of the game, right? Like, and in some ways, maybe it's kind of charmingly shit, but it isn't the point of the game, and so I feel kind of bad for judging it that way. Maybe I shouldn't feel bad for judging it that way. Maybe I should be more judgmental about it. The other criticism you get of the game is it requires a lot of modifications for it to be, barely playable these days. And look, part of this is it was a game that was released in 2010. It's gonna have trouble running on some of the more modern machines. I don't think that's unreasonable to say. That being said, it wasn't exactly a stable game when it came out on the machines it was intended to be played on. And that can be frustrating, and that does suck. And it does require an awful lot of work to make it playable. I think it's worth it, because I think the game, with the right modifications, still stands up. Especially if you've got, like, a tolerance for things looking a bit janky or shit. I have a bit of a tolerance for that. Look, I'm gonna be honest, so maybe I'm not the fairest critic here. Definitely, like, do modify the game before you play it, because I did a stream where it was unmodified, and oh my god, that sucked. That was such a pain. There were so many. It's the reason why there's now a crashed crashed command on my Twitch channel, is because of this game. So yeah, look, it requires a lot of work to make it playable. I think that's reasonable to an extent, and it's also completely reasonable to not like the game because of that. I just think the other stuff outweighs it, right? That's just me. So all of this brings me to an important thought. Who was the right faction, right? A lot of you will probably be in the comments right now saying Independent New Vegas, Independent New Vegas, Independent New Vegas. Right, okay, good. Yes, Independent New Vegas is probably the best outcome you can muster, especially in the face of the three factions vying for control of the Mojave. I get that. That's true, right? I always play Independent New Vegas. There's no alternative for me, right? Look, I'm the guy who did a video about why the lesser evil arguments are bullshit, so like it would be weird for me to come here and be like, actually I just picked Caesar's Legion, and it would be especially weird for reasons coming up in a bit. So let's just discount an Independent New Vegas. Let's just say, alright, we've accepted that an Independent New Vegas is probably the best outcome for the Mojave, even if I have questions about why Yes Man is upgrading himself, and have thoughts about whether the courier with his or her past is like capable of governing a country and actually taking care of people. But stranger things have happened, and it's the Wasteland, and the courier is clearly like an exceptional character, so maybe they can do it. So let's think about this, right? What do we see when we look at each of the factions? Well, let's start with the NCR. Now, a lot of people will say, well, the NCR, that's obviously the good guys. They are the closest analog to liberal democracy that we have in the Wasteland, at least in this part of the Wasteland, right? And you're not wrong. It is a state that is attempting to replicate the good bits of the pre-war America. You know, the democracy and the senates and all of this stuff. And look, it has its advantages and disadvantages. I think I'm pretty clear about my feelings. I'm pretty clear about my feelings on that sort of thing. So I'm not going to go into a deep dive on why I think that's a load of shit. But also, think about some of the residents you meet of the Mojave. They don't want the NCR there, because when the NCR shows up, you have to pay their taxes. You have to, support their military. You have to have their troops in your area, right? I know I said that I, through gross incompetence, had to get the NCR to be the sheriffs of Prim. My preference was for that not to be the case. But hey, look, we all make mistakes. And every interaction you have with the NCR state is fucking terrible, right? Think about that outpost with the statue of the Rangers shaking hands, right? They're keeping people there in bureaucratic lockdown, basically. They don't have enough troops to actually control the Mojave, yet they are being pushed into doing it. In a way, they are the perfect sort of replication of America, the America we know today. Obviously, the pre-war America in the Fallout setting has other issues, which our next faction, Mr. House, kind of nails, right? So Mr. House, I have mixed feelings about Mr. House. Look, I don't like oligarchs. I don't like what is basically the fantasy version of Elon Musk. This is what he imagines himself to be, right? I do like that he's honest, and I actually like that he's kind of right about something, right? So, and he does it in the same exchange, right? So he says, I would be the chief executive, right? I would be in charge. The deal is, I am in charge and I am not answerable to any authority. My authority comes from the army of Securitrons I have in New Vegas. And look, it's wrong. It's wrong. He's wrong and he shouldn't be allowed to do it. And you can stop him from doing it. I did. I killed him with a golf club on the stream playthrough. And I think that's good. Now, you do lose karma for killing him, which I do find kind of curious, actually. Because I guess it's kind of wrong to kill a 200-and-something-year-old man who looks like he's dry-aged himself. And he has one line that's simply devastating to the NCR, right? And it makes sense in the setting. This is correct in setting, right? Because we don't know if this is true in our world. Fingers crossed it's not, because, you know, look, I don't want to live in Fallout. Paying for stuff with bottle caps. I mean, like, imagine carrying 3,000 bottle caps with you everywhere. That's got to weigh a lot. And I'm not being one of these nitpicky RPG types who are like, oh, a gold coin weighs this, and so if you're carrying 3,000 gold, I don't really care, right? But also, that must fucking suck, right? And it would suck if we had to do that in real life. But Mr. House delivers the line, if you want to see the fate of democracies, look outside the window. And in the setting, at least, he's right. And there's an honesty to that, and a truthfulness to that makes him compelling, right? A really, really compelling character. Now, I'm not going to say that he is a great choice. He's very clearly not. But he doesn't seek conquest. He's not trying to, like, conquer the world. He is simply trying in a misguided way. And in kind of like, again, I mentioned Elon Musk. He's kind of like the idealized Elon Musk. He is the best Elon Musk that could exist. But yeah, he's the best Elon Musk that can exist, which should tell you that maybe he shouldn't exist and should stop trying to make people live in space or buy Twitter or whatever the fuck it is he's doing this week. I don't really give a shit, to be honest. And then you have Caesar's Legion, right? And Caesar's Legion are fascists. They are fucking fascists, right? They are the classic statue Avi Twitter fascist dickheads, right? They are cosplaying as a society. For no good reason, by the way. They're weakening themselves by cosplaying in the way that Caesar wants them to. And Caesar himself is actually kind of compelling too, in the way that Mr. House is. Because how many characters and antagonists in video games, and he is an antagonist, I've never really chosen to side with the Legion, how many of them can you sit down with and talk about Hegelian dialectics? I mean, that's just, for one, fascinating. And also, like, really, really funny because he's justifying something he doesn't have to do by trying to look smart. He's like, no, I know that this is really fucking stupid, but I must do it because it's a dialectic in action. My dude, just don't attack the NCR. Go in literally any other direction. Literally any other direction. It would be fine. Just do that, right? And look, so I'm ruling out the Legion off the bat, basically. Look, the Legion are fucking horrible, misogynist, fascist slavers who destroy cultures through absorption. Just unacceptable, won't be having them. I mean, the attitude that their ambassador to the Great Khans had is more or less a good summary of how they're gonna treat everyone else. So just, no Legion. But that leaves us with the NCR and Mr. House. And look, it's a good job that an independent New Vegas is a choice. And it would feel like a cop-out after all that to be like, well, actually, I just picked the independent New Vegas, which is what I would do. But when you look at all of the information in front of you, do you want an unaccountable 200-and-something-year-old dry-aged man running New Vegas as a chief executive who kind of who gouges the NCR on energy prices and just sort of purely keeps it there as a sort of capitalist society of customers? Or would you rather have the US in New Vegas, basically, and maybe have some degree of accountability, although judging from the NCR's own record, and again, this is one of those things that Caesar points out, you know, Tandy was president for like 50 years. And her dad, Aradesh, was also president. It doesn't look very much like a democracy. It does look like an American democracy, though, with the dynasties and stuff. You're basically confronted with Elon Musk versus the Clintons. That was an uncomfortably long pause. Look, really the game is trying to point you towards the NCR, and it's not trying, very hard to do it, because it dangles the independent option in front of you, with Benny being like, I'm trying to hand my legacy after you, Like, I don't know why I did an accent there. We should never do accents again on this channel, Jesus Christ. But, you should probably, in this circumstance, pick the NCR. But look, it's a good job the independent New Vegas option is there. Choose that. Choose that. Yeah, there's going to be some chaos after, but I have faith in the courier to fix it. So, my real, final thoughts on the game is, I had a blast playing it on stream. And I think if a game is fun, that's the point of the game. And so, yes, New Vegas has all these other problems and inconveniences, and there's plenty of criticisms out there of it. I think it's still, in the year of our Lord 2022, a fun game. A fun game. I think it's worth modifying it so that it's stable and maybe doesn't look so terrible and maybe doesn't cause as many problems. But I think that's what makes sense. And since it's the end of a video, I have to say, because it's this horrible YouTuber thing, and I'm so sorry, like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. If we get a good response to this, I might make the reviews a regular thing with different games, maybe not just games. Right, I completely forgot who my top paying patrons were, so I'm really sorry. I'm going to do the wall bit again. I am displaying you on the wall now. Thank you very much to my subscribers on Patreon. You should join at patreon.com/SKTheCrusader, especially if you enjoyed this and want me to put out 2 videos a month. One serious, one kind of fun. At least I thought this was kind of fun. But I want to do a special shout out to Droneriff, Kersley Mercutio, and Nauseum. They are my top tier subscribers. If you want a shout out and to be displayed upon the wall, then please, please, please subscribe to the Patreon. Alright, now that's the end of that awkwardness, and so with all of my thoughts on Fallout New Vegas out the way, everyone, it's a lovely day once again, and it's really weird. I keep recording on these beautiful days. I'm going to go out and enjoy myself for a little bit. If the weather's nice where you are, you go do that as well. Alright everyone, take it easy. I will catch you in the next video. Bye!